The desert was alive with the sound of war drums. Echoes bounced between the tall stone cliffs, making the earth feel like it trembled with each beat. Dust hung in the air, stirred up by the marching feet of thousands. At the center of it all stood Kalen, a human who should never have been there. He had no clan, no tribe, no army behind him. He was just one man caught in the storm of another people's war. The alien clan had gathered in full force. Their armor was dark, carved with strange runes that seemed to breathe red light. Their eyes glowed faintly, filled with pride and hunger for battle. They were not fighting for land or gold. They fought for honor, for the will of their ancestors, and for the right to rule. And in their eyes, Kalen was an intruder, an outsider dragged into something he could not understand. But fate had placed a sword in his path, and that changed everything. The weapon was old, older than the clan itself. Its blade was forged with runes that no living scribe could read. It had been kept locked away in the caves, waiting for the one whose blood would wake it. Kalen had stumbled upon it, half broken and bleeding, when he was hunted into the caves days earlier. The sword had burned in his hand, but it had not harmed him. Instead, it had pulsed with warmth, as if it recognized him. He had not known then what it meant. Now he stood in the arena, surrounded by thousands of the alien clan. With the same blade in his hand, across from him stood Cerise, the war daughter of the clan's ruling house. She was tall, her skin a shade of deep blue that caught the sun like polished stone. Her hair was woven with silver rings, her armor etched with the same glowing runes as her sword. She had been trained since childhood to fight, and her people watched her with reverence. To them, she was the living embodiment of their strength. She raised her blade and pointed it at Kalen. Her voice carried across the arena like thunder. One cut, one strike, that is all it will take to end you, human. The crowd roared their approval. Kalen tightened his grip. His heart pounded, but his eyes did not leave hers. He had survived battles before. He had survived worse than this, though not with so many eyes upon him. He knew he was not supposed to win. He knew this duel was not just a fight, it was a test. And yet, something deep inside him whispered that the sword he held was more than steel. The drums stopped. Silence fell. Cerise moved first. She was a blur of speed, her blade slicing through the air with the sound of fire tearing cloth. Kalen barely raised his sword in time, and when the two blades met, sparks and red light exploded outward. The force sent him stumbling back, but he held his ground. She struck again, faster, harder, pressing him with the skill of a lifetime warrior. Kalen's arms shook under the weight of each blow. He could hear the crowd chanting her name. Dust rose around them as their swords clashed again and again. His muscles screamed, his breath burned, but still he stood. Then it happened. Cerise fainted left and cut low, her blade slashing across Kalen's palm. His blood splattered onto the sand. The crowd erupted in cheers, certain the duel was already over. Cerise raised her blade for the finishing strike, but Kalen's blood had touched the runes on his sword. The moment it did, the blade came alive. The dull red glow turned into a roaring flame of light. Runes that had been silent for centuries burned bright, spilling fire across the steel. The air itself seemed to tremble with power. Cerise froze mid-strike. Her eyes widened. The crowd's cheers died into silence. One by one, the clan fell to their knees, as if pulled down by an invisible hand. The runes on Kalen's blade were not just symbols. They were a command, written in the language of their ancestors. The alien war daughter stood before him, her chest rising and falling with sharp breaths. Her blade hung loosely in her hand, forgotten. The human she had sworn to cut down now stood at the center of a miracle her people could not ignore. Kalen looked at his burning sword, at the thousands kneeling before him, and felt a chill run down his spine. He had not won. Something else had chosen him. Something older, something beyond his understanding. And for the first time, Cerise lowered her head. The arena was silent except for the crackling hum of Kellen's sword. The runes burned like fire etched into steel, casting red light across the sand. Thousands of alien warriors stayed on their knees, heads bowed low, unable to resist the weight of tradition. To them, the glowing sword was not just a weapon. It was a voice from their ancestors, and it had spoken through him. Kellen's chest heaved with heavy breaths. His palm throbbed with pain where Cerise had cut him, blood dripping down his wrist. He didn't understand why his blood had awakened the blade. He didn't even know what it meant. All he knew was that every pair of alien eyes in that arena now looked at him differently. Cerise stood frozen. Her blade hung at her side, forgotten, her face pale under the glow of the burning sword. She had trained her whole life to carry the honor of her clan, to be the chosen heir who proved her strength before the people. And now, in a single moment, the human had stolen the right that was meant for her. One of the elders stepped forward from the crowd. His armor was ancient, heavy with layers of metal, and his face was lined with years of war. He raised both hands, his voice carrying across the arena. The blade of ancestry has spoken. The blood of the stranger has awakened it. By the old law, he is chosen. The words sent a shiver through the gathering. The kneeling soldiers pressed their heads even lower to the ground. Kalen shook his head. No, you're mistaken. I'm not one of you. I didn't ask for this. The elders' eyes narrowed. It is not for you to ask, human. It is for the sword to choose. Cerise finally found her voice. Her hands trembled as she lifted her blade and pointed it at Kalen, though her arm shook. He is an outsider. His blood is weak. He cannot carry what belongs to us. Her voice cracked, but anger burned in her eyes. The elder's gaze turned cold. Would you deny the word of the ancestors, war daughter? The crowd stirred uneasily, whispers rising like wind through the stone caverns. To challenge the sword's choice was to challenge everything they had been taught, everything they had fought to protect. Kalen felt the weight of thousands pressing down on him. He hadn't come here to rule or to lead. He had come here only to survive. And yet, here he was, standing with a sword blazing in his hand, while an entire clan bent the knee. Cerise's breathing grew faster, her pride twisting into rage. She lunged forward, her blade flashing toward Kalen in a reckless strike. The crowd gasped. The elder barked a command, but it was too late. Kalen raised the sword to block her, and when the two blades met, the runes roared to life again. A shockwave burst outward, knocking Cerise back. She landed hard on the sand, her weapon torn from her grip. The crowd cried out, torn between loyalty to their war daughter and the undeniable power of the sword. Cerise lay there, her chest rising and falling. Her pride was shattered. She looked up at Kalen with hatred and something else, fear. Kalen lowered his blade. He did not strike her, though he could have. His voice was steady but low. I don't want your throne. I don't want your people. But I won't let you kill me. The elder raised his hands again. The law is clear. The sword does not lie. Until it falls silent, the human stands as chosen. This is not a matter of want, it is fate. Kellen's heart sank. He could feel the eyes of every warrior, every elder, every child watching him with expectation. They saw him not as a man, but as something more, something he had never asked to be. The war drums started again, slow and heavy. The kneeling warriors pounded their fists to the ground in unison, chanting a single word in their tongue. Kalen did not know the meaning, but he felt it. They were calling him something new. Cerise clenched her fists in the sand. The fire in her eyes had not gone out. She would not accept this, not while she still breathed. Kalen glanced down at the sword glowing in his hand. He did not understand it, but he knew one thing with certainty. Whatever had begun here was far from over. The night after the duel, the clan's caves glowed with torchlight. Fires burned in hollowed stone chambers, and chants carried through the air like whispers of old ghosts. Kalen sat alone in the center of the grand hall, the ancient sword resting against his knee. The runes no longer burned with flame, but faint red light pulsed along the blade like a heartbeat, as if reminding him that it had not finished with him yet. Dozens of alien elders had gathered in a circle, their voices low and heavy with debate. Some argued he should be honored as the chosen. Others whispered that he should be cast out before his presence cursed them. Every word, though spoken in their language, was charged with fear and reverence. Kalen didn't belong here. He knew it with every breath. Yet the sword had forced him into their law, and law to them was stronger than blood. From the shadows at the edge of the hall, Cerise watched him. Her jaw was tight, her fists clenched at her side. To see her people bow before a human was like a knife twisting in her chest. She had lived her whole life to carry the weight of her clan's pride, and now an outsider had stolen it with a single drop of blood. When the elders finally ended their arguments, the oldest among them rose and spoke. His voice was deep, commanding the hall into silence. The ancestors have spoken. Until the blade grows dark, the human is bound to us. He will stand as one of the clan. The warriors struck their fists against the ground in approval. The sound thundered in Kalen's ears. He wanted to argue, to throw the sword down and walk away. But when his fingers loosened from its hilt, the blade pulsed brighter, forcing him to grip it again. The elders' eyes gleamed. To them, it was proof he could not turn away. Later that night, Kalen was given a chamber deep within the caves. Alien guards stood at his door, more to watch him than protect him. He sat in the dim glow of a single torch, staring at the sword lying across the stone table. His palms still throbbed from the cut, the wound refusing to close, as though the sword demanded to drink more of him. He whispered to himself, "What do you want from me?" The sword gave no answer, only that steady pulse of red light. Outside his chamber, Cerise stood in silence. Her eyes burned with fury, but her thoughts were sharper than her anger. She would not challenge him openly again, not while the runes still burned. No, she would find another way. If the blade had chosen him, then she would break him where no sword could protect him. She turned to her most loyal warriors, those who still followed her even as the clan bent knee to the human. "He is no savior," she whispered. "He is a curse wrapped in flesh. And if the sword has blinded the elders, then we will be the ones to open their eyes." Her warriors nodded in silence. Plans began to form in the dark. Meanwhile, Kalen tried to sleep, but each time he closed his eyes, he saw the image of thousands kneeling before him. He had not earned their respect. He had not earned their trust. The sword had stolen it for him, and now it chained him to their fate. In the stillness of the cave, he realized something that chilled him. The clan didn't kneel to him because they wanted to. They knelt because the sword commanded it. And if that command ever faded, he would stand alone, surrounded by enemies who had never truly accepted him. The blade pulsed again on the table, casting its red glow across his face. Kalen clenched his jaw. Whatever this weapon was, it had thrown him into the heart of a storm, and he had no choice but to survive it. Far away in the torchlit corridors, Cerise sharpened her blade. The sound of metal scraping stone echoed softly. In the night, her eyes never blinked, her breath steady with patience. She would wait, she would watch, and when the right moment came, she would strike, not to win honor, but to reclaim it. The duel had ended, but the war between them had only just begun. The dawn broke red over the desert cliffs. Smoke from the clan's fires drifted into the pale sky, and the echo of war drums rolled across the stone valleys. Kalen stood at the mouth of the great cave, the sword strapped to his back. He had barely slept, his mind restless with unease. Around him, alien warriors moved with purpose, preparing for something he did not yet understand. The elder approached him, his long cloak dragging through the dust. "Human, he said in a voice like stone grinding on stone. "Your trial is not complete. The sword chose you, but choice means nothing if you cannot defend the clan. Today, raiders test our borders. You will stand with us." Kellen's stomach twisted. He wanted to argue, but he knew it was useless. The moment he had taken hold of the glowing blade, he had been tied to their laws. And now those laws demanded he fight for them. The warriors lined up in ranks, their armor glowing faintly with runes of their own. They looked at him with a mixture of fear and expectation. Some bowed their heads as he passed. Others narrowed their eyes, their loyalty thin and fragile. He could feel Cerise watching him from the crowd, her arms crossed, her stare sharp as a blade. The march began. They crossed the desert floor in silence, the heat already burning the air around them. Kellen's boots sank into the sand, but the aliens moved like shadows, swift and graceful. He was the only one out of place, the only one breathing heavy. Under the weight of armor, not his own. By midday, they reached the canyon where the raiders had struck. Smoke curled from the remains of a small outpost, its walls broken, its warriors slaughtered. The bodies had been left as warnings, their armor shattered, their runes dim and lifeless. Kalen tightened his grip on the sword's hilt. This was no ritual. This was war. The raiders came quickly, howling from the cliffs above. They were not of the clan but another tribe, their armor blackened, their faces painted with white ash. They leapt down with savage cries, blades raised high. The alien warriors clashed with them in a storm of steel, the sound of metal ringing through the canyon. Kalen found himself face to face with one of the raiders. The man's blade came down hard, and Kalen barely blocked it. Sparks flew as the sword struck, the force jarring his arms. He staggered back, swinging clumsily, but the raider pressed him with practiced strikes. Then the ancient sword in Kalen's hands flared. The runes lit up, pouring fire along the blade. His enemy froze for half a breath, stunned by the glow, and Kalen seized the moment. He struck hard, the burning edge slicing through the raider's weapon and dropping him into the sand. The clan warriors saw it. Their cries grew louder, their strikes fiercer, as if the sight of the glowing sword gave them strength. For every raider that fell, more pressed forward, but the balance began to shift. Cerise cut through enemies with deadly precision, her movements fast as lightning. But even she could not ignore the power the human carried. She watched him fight raw, unskilled, but guided by the sword's strange will. It angered her to see her warriors rallying around him, but she could not deny it. The weapon had made him into something they believed in. When the last raider fled into the cliffs, the canyon fell silent but for the heavy breaths of the living. The sand was dark with blood, and the air stank of iron. Kalen stood with the glowing sword still in his grip, his chest heaving, sweat pouring down his face. He looked at the fallen and felt no triumph. He had killed to survive, nothing more. The elder raised his arms to the sky. The chosen stands with us in battle. The ancestors do not lie. The warriors dropped to one knee, their voices rising in unison. Kellen's heart sank. The more he fought with the blade, the tighter its grip became on him. Cerise turned away, her fists clenched. She would not kneel, not to him. Not ever. That night, as the clan returned to their caves, Kalen felt the weight of every kneeling figure, pressing down on him like chains. The sword glowed faintly at his side, and he knew one thing with certainty. This was no gift. It was a trap. The clan's caves were quiet after the battle. Torches burned low, and the air was heavy with smoke and the smell of blood still clinging to the warriors who returned. Kalen sat by himself in the chamber the elders had given him, the ancient sword lying across his knees. Its runes pulsed softly, faint light running through the blade as if it were alive. He stared at it for a long time, his palm resting near the wound Cerise had cut. The cut should have healed, but it hadn't. The skin around it glowed faintly, as though his blood still carried the sword's fire. Every time he looked at it, his stomach twisted with unease. He remembered the canyon, the raiders falling beneath his hand, the clan kneeling afterward. He hadn't wanted their loyalty, hadn't asked for their faith. And yet, the more he fought with the blade, the more they seemed to believe he was some savior sent by their ancestors. The thought made his chest heavy. He wasn't a savior. He was just a man who wanted to survive. While Kalen wrestled with his thoughts, Cerise moved quietly through the halls of the caves. She had not forgotten the sight of her people bowing to him, nor the way their voices had risen when his blade flared in the canyon. To her, it was a humiliation she could never accept. She gathered a few of her closest warriors, men and women who still placed loyalty in her above all else. They met in the shadows near the lower chambers, away from the elder's eyes. Her voice was sharp but low. The sword has blinded them. They see him as chosen, but he is nothing. He bleeds like any of us. If we allow this to continue, he will take everything that should belong to our bloodline. One of her warriors frowned. But the elders, Cerise cut him off. The elders are old and afraid. They cling to the sword's glow like children clinging to fire. But fire burns, and when it consumes him, they will realize too late what they've done. We cannot wait for that. The warriors nodded, though unease flickered in their eyes. To defy the sword was dangerous. But their loyalty to Cerise was strong enough to silence their fear. Back in his chamber, Kalen heard a sound footsteps. He gripped the sword and rose. The guards outside remained silent, but when the footsteps stopped at his door, he tensed. The stone door slid open, and Cerise stood there, her arms folded, her expression unreadable. For a long moment, neither spoke. Then she stepped inside. "You don't belong here," she said at last. Her voice was calm, but the fire beneath it was sharp. "The sword may burn for you, but it is not yours. You don't even know what it is." Kalen tightened his jaw. "You're right. I don't, but I didn't ask for it either." "Then leave," she snapped. "Throw it aside. Walk away. Do not chain my people to your weakness." Kalen looked at her, then at the sword in his hand. He wanted nothing more than to do exactly that, to walk away, to vanish from their world and leave the weight behind. But when he loosened his grip, the runes flared, forcing him to hold it tighter. His voice came out low and bitter. "It won't let me." Cerise's eyes narrowed. For the first time, she saw not just defiance but fear in him. It made her hesitate. "But only for a heartbeat. You may fool the elders," she said coldly, "but you will never fool me. I will see the truth come out, even if I must carve it from your blood." She turned and left without another word, her footsteps echoing through the stone halls. Kalen sank back against the wall, gripping the sword until his knuckles went white. He was caught in a web of fate he couldn't escape, hunted not only by enemies outside, but by the woman who had once been his opponent. And the worst part was, the blade in his hand pulsed with something that felt less like power and more like hunger. The caves were restless that night. Whispers moved through the stone halls like smoke. Whispers that Cerise had not accepted the human. Whispers that some warriors would rise against him. Kalen sat alone in the great hall, the sword across his lap, its faint glow painting the walls in shades of red. He could feel the tension around him like a storm waiting to break. He thought of leaving, of escaping into the desert under the cover of darkness. But even if he tried, the sword clung to him, bound to his blood. It pulsed whenever he thought of letting it go, like a chain he could not break. He had no choice but to face what was coming. The sound of armored feet reached his ears. He stood, gripping the blade as shadows filled the hall. Cerise appeared, her own sword in hand, her face sharp and unyielding. Behind her, a dozen loyal warriors spread out, blocking every exit. "This ends tonight," Cerise said. Her voice was steady, but her eyes burned. "The sword chose you by blood, but blood is not enough. You do not carry our history. You do not carry our strength. You will never be one of us. Kalen raised the glowing sword, though his arms were heavy with exhaustion. I never asked to be, but I won't be your prey. Her warriors rushed forward. Steel clashed, the sound echoing through the chamber. Kalen fought clumsily at first, his strikes desperate, his breath ragged. But each time his blade met theirs, the runes flared, sending out bursts of energy that knocked them back. The sword seemed to guide his hand, striking where he would have failed on his own. Still, the numbers pressed him. He stumbled, a blade grazing his shoulder, pain lancing through him. Another warrior slammed into him, driving him toward the floor. The sword roared to life, its light blinding the hall. The ground shook, and the warriors fell back, shielding their eyes. Ceres did not retreat. She pushed forward, her blade ringing against his. Sparks flew as their weapons clashed again and again, the sound like thunder in the cavern. She moved with deadly grace, but Kalen no longer fought alone. The sword fought with him. At last, her blade locked with his. Their faces were inches apart, both straining with every muscle. Cerese's voice was a hiss. They kneel because of your weapon, not you. When its fire dies, so will their faith. Kalen's voice was rough but firm. Then let them kneel for the truth, not for me. With a sudden surge, the runes flared brighter than ever before. Heat coursed through Kalen's arm, into the wound on his palm. The blade burned with fire so fierce it forced Ceres back. She fell to one knee, her sword clattering against the stone. The hall was silent. Every warrior stared, frozen by the light. The elders had gathered in the doorway, their faces pale with awe. Slowly, one by one, the warriors dropped to their knees again, not to Ceres, not even to Kalen, but to the power of the sword that bound them all. Ceres knelt last. Her chest heaved, her pride broken. She looked up at Kalen with something new in her eyes, not hatred, but reluctant respect. Kalen lowered the sword. Its glow faded to a soft pulse, no longer roaring but alive all the same. He looked at the kneeling clan and felt no triumph, only a heavy truth. He was no king, no savior. He was a man chosen by a weapon older than all of them. But in that moment, he made his choice. I won't rule you, he said, his voice carrying through the hall. I will stand with you, not as master, not as outsider, but as ally. If the sword has bound us, then let it be for protection, not domination. The elder stepped forward, his voice heavy with finality. So it shall be. The clan stands, and the chosen stands with us. The hall erupted in chants, fists pounding the ground in rhythm. Ceres lowered her head, not in defeat, but in acceptance of a truth she could no longer deny. Kalen looked down at the glowing sword in his hand. It had dragged him into their world, but it was his choice what to do with it now. For the first time, he did not see it as a curse. He saw it as a chance to forge something new between human and clan. And as the chants echoed around him, Kalen knew the war was over. Not because he had won, but because he had chosen a path that no blade alone could command.